Yo, what is going on, guys? I've recorded this about 10 different times, and I keep getting interrupted, or phone calls, or my software keeps crashing. So many problems, but I just got back from seeing Far From Home, uh, my second time. So now I have seen it 2 times, and I feel like I can give a definitive review on this movie. Now, before we get into this, I will have a section of this movie that is endgame spoilers. I'm pretty sure everyone has seen Endgame, but just in case, I will have a little. The earlier parts of the review will be Endgame spoiler free. Then we move into Endgame spoilers, and I will give my final thoughts. And then we move into Far From Home spoilers. So you have been warned. I will not spoil. I will try to leave everything as vague as I possibly can until we get to the Far From Home spoilers. But there you go. So critics on YouTube seem to be bashing this movie pretty poorly. And normal viewers seem to kind of like the movie. It seems pretty mixed, though, like most people are mixed on it. When I first left this movie after seeing it the first time, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I thought it was better than Homecoming, but after seeing it a second time, I'm here to tell you it is not, and I'm not that big of a fan of this movie. I think it's one of the worst movies in the MCU, and I think it's probably the worst Spider-Man movie. Yes, no, it's not worse than Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I'll get into why. Now, let's get into the things I like first. So I hear a lot of YouTubers say the pacing of this movie is off. But for me, it's not. I actually think it's way better paced than Homecoming. Now I can understand where you're coming from, and something Sam Raimi's always been good at, but they never give Peter Parker a chance to breathe, especially with the events of Endgame and things like that. Once again, I will not get into spoilers until we get there, but he just needs a chance to breathe, and they don't really give it to him. But other than that, the pacing's good, in my opinion. I don't know what everyone's talking about. I think it's really good. I think the movie's paced pretty well. But I do wish there were... I do wish there was more of that Peter Parker alone time. It sounded weird. I think the action scenes in this movie are upped a lot more. I think they're a lot better. I will show a clip if I can find it, which I probably will be able to, but there's a clip from the trailer that's a really awesome action scene that was completely cut from the movie, and I don't understand why. I wish we could have got more action scenes, but I do think overall the action was better. I think the director, John Watts, kind of feels more comfortable with action now that he's done Homecoming. So yeah, I do like Tom Holland in the role. Even though the writing's not good and things like that, I still think Tom Holland kills it in this role, despite the fact that he's not given a lot. I think he could potentially be the best Spider-Man if he had better things around him. Because if we're going to be real here, Tobey might be the worst. Like, if Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland actually had things to work with, I think they could be a lot better. But overall, I like Tom Holland a lot in this role. Ned is good, I guess. He's funny. What else can I talk about without talking about spoilers? There's really nothing else in this movie that I like all that much. I mean, I think Jake Gyllenhaal gives it his all. that unintentionally rhymed. But Jake Gyllenhaal doesn't have a lot to work with. And in my opinion, his character fell very flat. But now we will be getting into Endgame spoilers. If for some weird reason you have not seen Endgame, first of all, don't watch Far From Home. Just leave this review and go watch Endgame. But I wanted to talk about Endgame spoilers because I do not like the way they handled the events of Endgame in this movie. So, obviously, Endgame ends with Tony Stark dying, Black Widow's dead, and Cap is gone, but pretty much dead. And first of all, the movie opens, and it's not the opening of the movie, but it's after the Marvel logo, comes on. But the movie basically opens with them making fun of the characters who are dead. And this isn't really a spoiler, but they make fun of the characters being dead, which I don't understand. And then immediately after that, you see Peter Parker, and he's not really affected at all. And this movie doesn't really you can tell the world's not really affected. Like, Peter Parker will sometimes look over and he'll be like, oh, I miss Tony. That would be something you would do like 5 years after the death of Tony Stark. There should be way more ramifications and way more things going on. And there just isn't. I don't think that they do the deaths justice. I mean, I would think like everyone around the world would be wearing like Iron Man mask and be praising him and stuff. No, there's none of that. It's like the world has already moved on. And I also don't really like how the blip is explained. That's what they call it in the movie. It's when Thanos snaps that they call it the blip. I don't like the way the blip was explained. It was kind of just brushed over, and then you just have to accept it. Also, and this also isn't really a spoiler, but in this movie they go on summer vacation, and it just seems a little weird that immediately after coming back from the snap that they would go on summer vacation, especially after losing the Avengers. What's even weirder is that Peter Parker is not affected by this at all. I do not like the way they handled the death. Like I said, I felt like they needed a filler movie in between this and Far From Home to really sell the deaths. And I realize this is a Marvel movie and this is also a Spider-Man movie, and typically I would get mad. But actually I'm one of the people who have defended the way they've handled Spider-Man in the MCU. I think it works, but I don't like the way they handled it in this one. I don't know what else I can really talk about, man. Let's just get into spoilers. If you guys want my quick thoughts on this movie, though, I will leave my letterbox down below. I will warn you, though, my letterbox potentially spoils a little bit. But yeah, I think the pacing's better. I think the action is potentially better. I do not like the villain that much. I do not like many of the side characters. Oh, I do have something else I can talk about. I can talk about the humor of this movie. This movie has a lot of hit or miss humor. A lot of it's hilarious, but most of it is just not. And they sit on jokes for way too long. Also, it has that typical Marvel jokiness in a serious part of the movie, which typically I don't like. Like when they do it with Avengers or with, I mean, he's Robert Downey Jr., so of course he can, but when they do it with Iron Man and he pulls it off, it works. But in this movie, it just doesn't work at all. And they use humor a lot to kind of move away from stupid plot points that don't make sense. And that's something else with this movie. The plot points make 0 sense. Everything is brushed over. There's also a scene in this movie where Peter Parker has to take a train. It's a sequence involving a train, and it just feels completely out of place. And apparently they cut a lot of really good parts from this movie, and I'm just like, then why would you include that part? Like, why would you include that stupid part when you could put a bunch of better moments in this movie? So the humor doesn't land, and I do not like all of that. Something I love about the Sam Raimi movies is Peter Parker just feels like a real human. He gets a chance to breathe. He just feels like one of us. And in this movie, that never happens. Not once. Also, the dialogue in this movie is so bad. And the exposition in this movie is so bad. God, I'm so mixed on this movie. Part of me wants to like it, but I just can't. I'm going to give this movie, I think I'm going to give it like a 60 out of 100. I have no idea where to rank this movie. Go check out my letterbox if you want to know more. Before we get to the spoiler section, if you do go see this movie, stay for the end credits. It's completely worth it, especially if you're a fan of the older Spider-Man movies. You will like the reference. Yeah, that's what I'll call it. Stick around for the end credit scene. It's worth the price of admission alone. If I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even really go see Far From Home a second time just so I could see it a second time. I mostly went because I had a friend who wanted to go, and I was like, I'm not gonna turn down that end credit scene. There are 2 end credit scenes. The last one, I guess, could potentially be important, but if you have not seen Captain Marvel, it won't make any sense, and I don't really know if it's worth staying for. Like, you can kind of just look it up, but it is there. But the first end credit scene is definitely worth it. Oh, and something else I want to talk about real quick is Zendaya as Mary Jane. I originally didn't mind this move. I know a lot of people hated this. I didn't, because we've never gotten a good Mary Jane on screen, so I was okay with them switching it up. She's fine, I guess. But yeah. So anyways, we're going to be getting into the spoilers. That is the warning. You have been warned. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Alrighty. So, this movie obviously opens with, like I said, the Avengers. Their school is doing like one of those news things. What? I've been out of high school for 3 years and I don't know what anything's called. Also, I'm really nasally. I have a sinus infection, so I apologize. But obviously it opens like that, and then they kind of poke fun at the Avengers dying. This has been, what, like maybe a week after the Avengers have died? No one is affected, and it really just, it pisses me off, man. It is annoying. Then the next scene automatically is Tom Holland going, I have a plan, and his plan is to sit next to Mary Jane on the plane when they go over to Europe. Now, I thought this was sweet. Cool. There's just one problem. They have no chemistry. They have no friendship. They have nothing. This doesn't make sense. It comes out of complete left field. Now, what I would have liked more is if, let's say, Mary Jane and Peter Parker built up a chemistry in the blip. I'm under the impression that you can talk to each other in the Reality Stone. I don't really know exactly how it works, but that's what I've been led to believe from what Doctor Strange has said in the past. So, unless they built that chemistry up in the blip, it doesn't make sense, and you can clearly tell that they didn't. The thing that I do not like about this movie, for the most part, is they do not take their time with the characters. It is something Sam Raimi did perfectly. And I'm sorry to keep comparing him to Sam Raimi, but I have to. I mean, the pacing, they just force too many things onto you at once. What I would have much preferred is if this movie took things a little slower, maybe didn't have as much comedy and as much stuff going on after the death of the Avengers. Is no one paying attention? Is no one grasping that? They didn't even focus on it. But okay, and once again, this is a Spider-Man movie. I'm aware, and I do agree that they focus on the Avengers a little too much in these, even though I'm one of the people who defend the way this is set up because I think it works for the MCU. This is the movie that follows up with Endgame. Why is no one caring? It's just ridiculous to me. But this movie doesn't take its time with anything. And I would have much preferred if it took its time really reflecting on the death of the Avengers and took its time, because the trip would have made them the most perfect sense for them to do this, in my opinion. Not to mention, I'm sure the whole world was devastated, including Mary Jane. I'm sure, like, some of her family didn't get blipped away, and now they're older. This would have affected people a lot more than it did in the movie. No one cared. But you would have thought that some bad stuff even happened to Mary Jane. And with the way the world was reacting, and with the way Peter was, I personally would have just liked it if they would have just focused on their friendship. Like, they just build a good relationship as friends over the course of this vacation, because it would have been a nice time for them to get away and reflect and build friendship. And I felt like that would have worked a lot more than a relationship just coming out of nowhere, even though they don't really know each other. And it makes no sense to me. Peter seems completely unaffected by the death of Tony Stark. Something else I want to talk about is Uncle Ben. Now, Uncle Ben, I understand why they haven't focused on the storyline. It's already been done. But he clearly exists in this universe. He does. In the movie, Tom Holland has Ben Parker's suitcase. You know, the one that holds all that sentimental value to him. He has that suitcase. So clearly he exists in this universe. And I would have thought the death of Tony Stark and people blipping away and all this would have made him way more emotional, and I think it should have brought up Uncle Ben a lot more. I think he should have reflected on losing Uncle Ben as well. I thought that's how they were going to introduce Uncle Ben into this universe when I figured out that Tony Stark died. When I watched Endgame, I was like, that's how they're going to do it. They're going to focus on Endgame, and that death is going to remind him of Uncle Ben, and he's going to be absolutely devastated. It's going to be like Spider-Man 2, just non-stop disrespect to Spider-Man. But no, he's not affected at all. And at the end of the movie, apparently, Uncle Ben's bags get blown up off screen, and no one cares. Aunt May doesn't have a problem with it, and Peter doesn't have a problem with it. And I don't really understand at all. Something else I have an issue with is I thought with Aunt May knowing that he was Spider-Man would have made for a really cool dynamic, because she finds out obviously at the end of Homecoming. And I thought that would be really cool. They could have done a lot of really cool storylines with that. And then after the events of Infinity War, and technically Peter died, I figured that would have really made Aunt May a little bit uncomfortable with him being a superhero. And then Tony Stark dies, and with the loss of Uncle Ben and all that, and the fact that he just wanted to get away on a summer vacation, I felt like Aunt May should have respected that more, and I felt like she should have been more negatively affected. I felt like she should have just respected that he just wanted a break, because that's what Spider-Man needed. I felt like she would have just really respected him and would have given him that break instead of packing a Spider-Man suit and cracking jokes. Also, something else that she does is she basically uses Spider-Man to raise money. The beginning of the movie, she's doing a charity event and has Spider-Man there, and she's using him basically as to get money. She's using him, and she's totally cool with him being Spider-Man. She has no problems with it, and this is how she uses it. And I just have a major issue with it. There's so much disappointing in this movie. I just realized that I've been rambling for 16 minutes, and I still have a lot more to go, so I'm going to try to hurry up. But they just handled Aunt May wrong. They handled Peter wrong. They should have focused on the death of the Avengers a lot more. There's just a lot I really do not like in this movie. However, something I really do not like is how they handled Mysterio. Mysterio. If you guys can't tell by my voice, it probably sounds different from what it sounded like 10 seconds ago. I'm actually recording this on a different day, and I'm sick, so that's great. But I'm not really a fan of what they did with Mysterio's character. Now, originally I was super excited because, like I said, I like Jake Gyllenhaal. I like the character of Mysterio. He's probably top 5 favorite comic book character for me. I don't really like what they did with him in this movie. Now, originally I was excited because I thought, because of how he's done in the comics, that it would introduce the multiverse, especially from how the previews were done. I thought that would be a good way for them to introduce the multiverse into the MCU. But that's not what happened. What actually happened was he's a former colleague of Tony Stark, and he's the one who invented the barf technology from Civil War. And his whole group of people are also used to work for Tony Stark or has some affiliation with Tony Stark, and they don't like him very much. But Quentin Beck is just a normal dude who makes illusions with drones in order to make himself look like the hero. And I just wasn't really a fan of that. I wanted them to do the more actual comic book Mysterio, where he they could introduce the multiverse that way, and they didn't do that. Instead, they did another villain of Tony Stark, but he's actually a villain of Spider-Man now, and it was just pretty stupid and lazy. Basically, it's the same thing they did with the Vulture, but the Vulture's a way better character. Jake Gyllenhaal gives a good performance for what he gives a good performance for what he's given in this movie. It's nothing incredible, but he gives a really good performance. Also, there's a scene in the movie where it's really the only moment Spider-Man gets a break in the entire movie, but he's sitting at a bar with Mysterio, and then as soon as he leaves, it's revealed that all of that was an illusion and just an attempt to get these glasses that Tony Stark gave Peter to where he can control this thing that has missiles and drones and all kinds of stuff on it, a super powerful weapon that you should not give a kid. And he gives it to, and Mysterio convinces Peter to give him the glasses. And then once all that is revealed, he goes into this huge exposition. It's like the laziest writing I have ever seen. Jake Gyllenhaal delivers it very well, obviously. But that just annoys me. The exposition, how they made Mysterio, I'm just not really a fan of it. I will say though, I do like the costume of Mysterio. I think it's really good. I like Jake Gyllenhaal's performance. The way they did Mysterio's special effects and stuff was incredible. I was nervous that they weren't going to be able to really do justice to the character, but they definitely do. Obviously, there's a scene where he gets pulled into one of Mysterio's illusions, like from the comics. It's only one scene, really. I mean, it's technically two, but the final scene doesn't really count. So there's really only one, like, cool action scene with Mysterio where, Peter's in an illusion, and it's so well done. I absolutely loved it, and I wish we could have got more of that. I wish we could have got more of the comic book accurate Mysterio. But no, we didn't, and it's a little disappointing. That action scene, I mean the illusion scene, is so good though. I especially like the part where, once again, spoilers, but I mean you shouldn't be watching this far anyways, if you haven't seen the movie. But there's a grave that says Tony Stark on it, and Mysterio goes, "If you were such a good hero, maybe Tony would still be alive." And he crawls out of the grave, and it zooms into his face, and spiders are crawling out of it, and then the spider eyes turn into Mysterio's head, like a bunch of Mysterios, and I just thought that was so well done. It's basically just straight from the comics. I mean, not exactly that, but it's basically straight from the comics. I just wish we could have got more of Peter being messed up from Mysterio's illusions, like how he is in the comics, like he doesn't know what's real. I mean, we got a little bit of that, but not really. I mean, there's one scene where Jon Favreau picks him up and he's like, "Happy, are you real?" And that's really all we got with that, and that was kind of annoying. I wish we just could have got more of what made Mysterio so cool in the comics. But Jake Gyllenhaal gives it a decent performance. It's not nearly as good as Vulture. I thought Vulture was really well done in Homecoming. It's basically a clone of Vulture, and I just don't really like it because I think that's the theme that all the villains are going to follow now for Spider-Man. But overall, it's pretty good. Jake Gyllenhaal's portrayal. The movie, on the other hand, I am so mixed on. There are parts that I like, but for the most part, I'm just not really feeling it. God, I don't know what else I could talk about. I mean, I already talked about Peter and his connections with his friends and stuff, and how I thought that could have been done better. I've already talked about him and Mary Jane. I've already talked about, I don't know. There's a scene where he's building his own suit, which I really liked, because if you know anything about Spider-Man, he builds his own suits. I mean, it was done very differently from how he usually does it, but I still liked it. But then Jon Favreau turns on AC/DC music, and I'm like, come on. Like, that's reserved for Tony, and this is a Spider-Man movie. They're just focusing too much on making this story about Iron Man and less about Spider-Man. And, oh yeah, that's something else I talked about, is I don't think they do good capitalizing on the events of Endgame. What else? There was something else I wanted to talk about. A lot of the humor doesn't land. I don't remember if I already mentioned that. And then there's obviously one more thing I have to mention, which is the greatest end credit scene of all time. I heard how good this credit scene was, but I didn't know what it was. And when it went to it, I thought we were going to get the Sinister Six. I was like, yes, because it's kind of the rumor that was going around. But no, it was just J.K. Simmons returning as J. Jonah Jameson, my favorite character from the Sam Raimi movies. Yeah, that was done very well. Because he's the one guy that you cannot recast. I mean, it's pretty hard to recast everyone from the Sam Raimi movies. I mean, Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe and J.K. Simmons are basically irreplaceable. But I'm so glad they brought J.K. Simmons back. I would imagine this is a one-time cameo, that he's not going to be in it anymore. But yeah, I really enjoyed that part. But then the end credit scene kind of annoyed me after that. So it gets revealed that Mysterio's plan actually worked, and he used the projections and editing to make it look like Peter is the one who was controlling the drones. and that he killed a bunch of innocent people, which I actually like that part. I thought that worked. But then at the end, he's like, Spider-Man's real name is Peter Parker. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how they're really going to tell that story now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the whole world knowing that Peter Parker's Spider-Man, which is why I also don't think we're getting another J. Jonah Jameson unless he makes a cameo like that again, because obviously Peter's not going to go work for him. But that's interesting. I am actually kind of satisfied with that though, because technically speaking, J.K. Simmons unmasked him and figured out who Spider-Man was, which makes me happy. But yeah, there were just little things like that, and obviously I think I already talked about it. I don't remember what I talked about. I'm so sick, and I recorded that I think two days ago, and I couldn't muster up the strength to record yesterday. But because this video was supposed to be out a lot sooner than this, but yeah, no one watches my videos anyway, so it's okay. But I already talked about the relationship between Peter and Aunt May, I believe. I'm going to re-watch this footage later and make sure. But I wasn't a fan of how they handled that either. I thought they could have had a really cool dynamic with that, but instead nothing really happened. There were also a few scenes that you could have just completely left out of this movie. I mean, I already talked about the train scene and how stupid it is, and how it kind of wastes a lot of time, but there are other moments like that too. And they could have put a lot more character development and moments into the story rather than just those pointless things. But overall it's a decent movie. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I don't think it's that bad. Like I think I said I'd give it a 60 out of 100 or a 50 out of 100, and I still stand by that, obviously. Let me know what you guys thought about it, and yeah, thanks for watching. Peace.